Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. And I bet a lot of you can remember when lithium was one of the hottest materials on the planet Earth. And now one of those that people are trying to shun in a big way. And in fact, one of the stocks we're going to cover on the Rebel's Edge is down some 30% because of that. We'll have that and a whole lot more on the Rebel's Edge. Bang!
There it is. What a difference a day makes, huh, John? I mean, just looking at the markets and the broad vision, looking down at it, just seeing things look a lot different than they did yesterday. I mean, even from the start, it's one of those things where it just felt a little stickier today to the upside, which, we still got part of the day left, but right now things are looking pretty good.
Exactly. Well, he is, of course, Pete Najarian, folks. I'm Jon Najarian, and we are bringing you on a daily basis the Rebel's Edge, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Fridays, well, we might have a different version of Rebel's Edge in the future, but right now we're using that as our travel day.
Yeah.
So Pete's exactly right. What a difference a day makes for everybody from lithium companies like Lithium America to an airline like Alaska Airlines, for those of you who remember. Yesterday, they actually asked the FAA to shut down flights for a couple hours, and here we are today with the stock screaming higher. But let's get started with the macro minute, Pete.
Let's do it.
Macro minute, stocks fell for a fourth straight day yesterday. That's the longest losing streak since January. Obviously, just like Pete said, the market's rebounding today because the chip makers aren't getting clocked like they were yesterday. But nonetheless, 4 straight down days, that kind of wakes people up a little, doesn't it, Pete?
It does. And we're seeing a little bit of a drop in volatility, which, normally signals something a little bit better because we've been spiking up closer and closer towards that 20 level all the time. But today we've started out in the 18s. Now we're into 17. So that's better. It's interesting to see, though, John, early on at least, gold, that was up $16 back over 2,400. You still have copper having a pretty nice day. Crude oil has been moving around in a strange way, but somewhere call it between 82 and 83. I think when you see that backdrop, you're feeling a little bit more comfortable maybe right now, even though that's some of the alternative investment stuff. It's pretty interesting just to see how things are going from the macro perspective. Now, we still got the afternoon to come, but right now things are looking pretty good.
And one of the things that we're about to cover, Pete, on Fantastic Futures.
Yeah. Fantastic Futures.
One of those things is Pete's favorite commodity, which is cocoa, used in medical products, not just in chocolate. But cocoa, Pete, July cocoa contract higher by double digits, 10% today. Ouch.
Yeah.
Beginning of the year, this was like $4,200. Pete, today, believe it or not, trades through 11,000. 11,000.
Well, like you said, it's one of my favorites to at least refer to anyway. I don't know if that's so good because that means that a lot of our costs are probably going up along with this thing. But as cocoa's moving to the upside, we've talked about a lot of the different reasons why, some of it being weather, obviously demand. Like you said, we've got all of that. I was looking at the exact same thing, John. When you look at this and you say year to date, okay, what has this thing done? Well, it's only up 160%. That's all. I mean, no big deal. Over the last year, by the way, that was year to date. Over the last year, 280% is how much it's up. So to say that cocoa's in a great spot right now for those that are actually trading within that would be not saying enough, because this thing is absolutely on fire. It's been ripping to the upside. It literally looks, John, like bottom left to upper right, almost in a straight line. I mean, very few pullbacks at all. So it's just amazing to watch what's going on right now.
Yeah, Pete, this is a historic high for cocoa. And cocoa tree health and the production, those are two things that limited the amount available. And if you're new to this, folks, there is supply and there's demand. And if there's too much supply, price usually goes down. If there's too much demand and not enough supply, well, that's what we've got right now. Prices go up. And that's exactly what's been happening all year long. So we just point out once again that Pete's favorite commodity, doing pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, let's talk about Alaska Airlines because, yesterday they asked the FAA to shut themselves down because of some software glitch, not because a door fell off in mid-flight, thank God. But apparently they got it resolved pretty quick, Pete. And then today they come out with Q2 earnings. They forecast that they'd be between 220 and 240. And now they expect the 2024 earnings of 525 a share. All that much better than expected. And that's why the stock's up 6% at mid-session.
Yeah, it's a stock that's just having a great day. You just mentioned it. I mean, despite all of the negatives that we have heard in the news, they just continue to have that demand. And we've heard that already now from United Airlines as well. Now we're hearing it from Alaska. We're seeing a lot of the other names move to the upside as well, maybe even some unusual out there in Southwest and some of the other names out there. By the way, we did see some of the Jets option paper the other day where they were buying puts, just to give people the information of what I was looking at when we were talking about this on a Zoom call. I was saying, hey, look, they're buying puts because they just want to protect a long position, and they've gotten very, very inexpensive, and that was a hedge, not actually looking for them to go to the downside. They have been going up, up, up. We're looking at a stock today, John, in Alaska that's up 6.5%. A very, very nice move and some very impressive numbers as well.
Well, and that Jets, folks, is an ETF, an exchange-traded fund that Pete's talking about there. And Delta is the biggest in there. They're 11.7%. United Airlines is 11%. American Airlines is 10.7%. Alaska Airlines only 3.25% of that. But nonetheless, Pete is exactly right about the concentration of those top 5 or 6 carriers and what they do to that particular ETF, which today, let me see, Pete, is up 2.4%. For an ETF, that's a pretty decent move. Yeah. Wouldn't surprise you if a stock was up 2.4%, but an ETF, a broad market ETF, or maybe not broad, but certainly an ETF that's got, whatever this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different stocks in it. That's pretty good movement, Pete.
Yep. Nice move.
All right, let's talk about eBay and Morgan Stanley, because Morgan Stanley was very negative on this stock. And now they say because of their embrace of artificial intelligence, of course, AI, they've turned this bearish analyst bullish. And now that analyst, Nathan Feather is his name, says, hey, I think there's 25% more upside in this one now. So he flips from bearish to bullish, and now he's saying pretty good upside for the stock. From a previous target of $35, his new target is over 60, Pete.
Yeah, and it is amazing to see that kind of a flip, John, and all of it based upon one thing, AI. And obviously eBay, pretty happy to hear about this. And that move, as you said, we're looking at the price target of 35, and now it's 62. Either he's a little bit late or he's being extremely aggressive, and maybe it's a little bit of both, but a double upgrade already makes a statement as well. So Morgan Stanley certainly very, very bullish on eBay. eBay's been a stock that really hasn't performed the way a lot of folks have probably expected over the last, I'd even say, last couple of years. But now with this, I think this is something that they're absolutely laser focused on AI, how that's going to absolutely help the margins and the sales and everything else with eBay. It's going to be a very, very impressive move to the upside if we can get there, John. But 62 price target, pretty aggressive, I'd say right now.
Yeah, pretty aggressive. But for a guy to flip from that negative to that positive based on this alone, Pete, is pretty interesting. And obviously, we're paying attention to it. By the way, just to throw this out there, Cocoa, Pete, in March was 8,000, and today it's 11,000. I'm still just, flabbergasted by how much it's gone up this year. And the next thing we're going to talk about is lithium, because Lithium America is going to be launching 55 million shares priced at $5 each so that they can raise $275 million. So it's bullish if they can raise it at that price, Pete. But I'm thinking that as many of these projects as these companies have the opportunity to pull lithium out of the ground, they might hold off on that a little bit because the demand just isn't there in the same way as it was in 21, 22, and 23.
And that chart says it all that was just up there, John, because this is a stock that's been absolutely crippled and just massively sold to the downside. By the way, huge short interest here as well. We're talking about 9%. I mean, take a look at that. It's pretty awful. It is very, very close. It might even have gotten to the 52-week lows. I'm not sure if it did or not, but I know it was getting very close early on, John. Also, incredible amount of turnover. It does make a lot of sense, but the turnover, 9 million in the first 90 minutes of the day. They only average about 3.6 million. So gives you a little bit of an idea of how attracted people are into this positioning. Now, the real key is with those shorts, when do they start to cover? Is there even a time where they say we're going to start covering some of this short? I'm not really sure right now. It should be pretty interesting. One of the biggest problems that they've also got, John, the cash burn is just extremely high. When you start to look within the company itself, there's a good reason why they're having to raise this money. It's also, a loan from the U.S. Department of Energy. There's a combination of a lot of things going on right now. This is a company where financially I'd be a little bit concerned. And quite frankly, if I was short it, I might even wait a while longer, despite the fact that it's gotten hammered today, as you said, 30%. Getting hammered, it still might have room even to the downside from here.
Well, again, just doing what Pete and I do, folks. I pulled up a lithium carbonate futures contract to take a look at it, Pete. Mm-hmm. And in October of 22, it was 60,000. Now that same contract is 11,000. So yeah, you've seen just the lithium has just been decimated. And if you put any company that's tied to lithium against that, that's while it's good for the EV makers, if they had the same demand, again, supply and demand, if they had the same demand as they had back in 2022, this would be great because their big input is way down in cost. But instead, their main input being down like this isn't benefiting them because it's actually making it harder for them to raise money, Pete, which is why they're having to do it at $5 a share. If you take a look, folks, at LAC, let me see what the 2-year number would be on that one, maybe, Pete. Lithium America, 2 years ago, let's see, I'm going to pull it up here. 2 years ago, Pete, it was north of, it's less than half of where it was 2 years ago, and a fair amount less than half of that. So,
not good.
Ouch. Yeah. Ouch. All right. Well, we've got one more stock for you, folks, and this is good news. D.R. Horton posted their fiscal Q2 earnings, $3.52 a share. That beat Wall Street expectations of $3.17. So very good. They are the largest home builder in America. And even with interest rates moving like this, Pete, to the upside, their revenue for the period was $9.1 billion. So they expect some rosy things going forward as well. So DHI is seeing some pretty good money flows today.
And they were talking about there's still, there remains a tight supply, John. That's one of the things that was brought up. Their margins are still holding up pretty nicely. The demand is still there to some degree. So there's a lot of different positives that come from this. And by the way, D.R. Horton and most of the builders, that was one of those hidden areas, I think, in the first quarter of the year that people were not paying attention to at all. But these names were absolutely hitting 52-week highs and looking pretty daggone strong. Even today, did it get back to the 52-week highs? No, but it got pretty daggone close. It got up to, I think, 154 today. The highs was 165. So not that far away from getting to those 52-week highs. This is a really, really interesting quarter. I think that probably surprised a lot of people how strong it was because people's expectations are, well, I'm looking at the 30 and what's it cost to do the house? Is it 6%, 7%, whatever it might be? And yet they are still doing extremely well. So that says a lot about what that demand really looks like right now, Jon. And I think it's pretty impressive for DR Horton and what they've been able to accomplish in a very difficult environment.
Yeah, an environment where obviously the biggest issue they have, Pete, is the headwind of those higher interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to be able to put up these numbers like this, very impressive. There's just not enough, again, back to the supply and demand thing, there's not enough supply. So they're able to get the prices that they want, and they don't really have to dicker much, I guess, for the few homes that they're putting out there. They're able to reap a pretty nice reward from that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Pete. We were, I think, ready to dive into one of your favorite characters in all of sports, Deion Sanders. So I'll let you take it from here.
What's not to like about Deion Sanders, quite honestly? Although there is something, Jon, because I'm just curious. I saw this little note out, and nobody was really paying attention to it that I could see. But there is a flood of guys that are starting to leave Colorado's football program since the start of April. And it's been 14 players. One of them's a 4-star. He's a cornerback. And then you've got 13 other players that are at least 3 stars or higher that are all leaving the program. Now, why is that? We all heard about all this great stuff and what Deion's doing there. And I'm a fan. I think Deion's just a wonderful guy and does a lot of things right. Some things wrong. I didn't like what happened last year at Oregon, but that's a different story when they're walking onto the field and wiping their feet on the Oregon Duck and all the rest of that, Jon, after he was just mad about what had happened with Nebraska at his own stadium. So that sometimes comes back to bite you. But that being said, I still love the guy. I love what he wants to do with players and do things right. I will say this, though, Jon. They won those first 3 games last year, right? Everybody was excited. Everybody's on the bandwagon. The Rock and all those guys who want to jump on the bandwagon, they were all on there. They were hanging on for dear life and loving it, right? Well, then they lost 8 of the next 9. And suddenly the Rock and everybody is not showing up over there for these games anymore as they're getting beat up. So it's just curious to me to see how many of these guys are leaving. I find it odd. It feels like a little bit of a jailbreak. Why are these guys all leaving? A lot of younger players that are wanting to go somewhere else. And we don't know what playing time looks like, but there was certainly an exodus of that. So I find it kind of interesting. And by the way, one more guy today left, and it's a running back that was the rookie of the year in the AAC, a running back out of the University of Houston, Jon. So you've probably even seen him play, Alton McCaskill. So I'm curious. I want to throw out to you, what in the world is going on? First of all, I'm of the camp where if you leave a team, you should have the right reasons on why you're leaving. Or are you just leaving because you're not the starter yet and all the rest of that, right? I mean, you got to put in your time. And I don't know what the reasoning is behind this, but they certainly have lost a decent number of guys to the portal. And I find it a little bit alarming because it's by far one of the biggest of anybody in the portal right now, despite the fact that they also have signed some of the best numbers when it comes from guys from the portal as well. So they're still in the top 10 when it comes to signing players out of there and their stars and all the rest of it, but they're not able to retain them. What do you think is going on?
Well, I think what it is, Pete, is that you've got players that look at the roster, and if a couple big linebackers signed with Colorado and I was at Colorado, even if I had transferred in and all of a sudden I look at a couple beasts that just transferred in, I might have second thoughts about whether or not I'm going to play. And the nice thing about the portal is that it works just like you and I talked about, supply and demand. So if, like it happened last year when Deion first got there, if you get there and the talent on the team isn't as deep, well, you're going to get a lot of players leaving because Deion told them to. He said, yeah, you don't think you can play here? Go. But now that you've got a bunch of players in and a bunch of new ones coming in as well, what if you are a pretty fair assessor of your own talent, and you say, I don't know if I'm going to play with these new guys coming in. The coach is drooling all over him, and he hasn't said crap to me lately. Well, more or less, a quote I heard from Dion, Pete, was this: I pray to God that these players go to a program that challenges them and holds them accountable and develops them as young men. Unfortunately, we weren't the program that could accomplish it. So go get it, man. Because if you've got talent and you want to develop it, go find a place that'll do it better than we can. And, you know, it's not really as much of a backhanded, hey, don't let the door hit you on the way out. But I think he's being real with these players, Pete, because you and I know, some players were going to, would say to Ohio State or Oklahoma or Texas, hey, I'll transfer, but how much you going to pay me?
Yeah.
And that really rubbed a lot of these coaches, including Nick Saban, the wrong way. And he's like, well, if you don't want to be here, don't be here. We'll talk about your money if you're a big star and all that kind of stuff. But if you ain't a big star and you can't even crack the starting lineup, maybe you should be somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's an interesting thing. And I was a little bit surprised to see that many jumping into the portal to get out, basically, saying, all right, we're out of here. We'll see you next time. And that whole thing, very, very interesting. All right, Jon, how about this? Let's do a little quick mock draft. We're only going to do the top 5. So I think that most everybody has it pretty close to right, except for the last one. So I've got Caleb Williams going to the Bears. Now, this is not who I think is the right pick. It's who I think is going where.
Yeah.
I think Caleb goes to Chicago. I think Jaden Daniels goes to Washington. I think Drake May goes to New England. I think they're looking for that big kind of stiffer type quarterback, and that's what they'd be getting out of Drake May from North Carolina. I think Marvin Harrison makes sense for Arizona because they want to get as much talent on the field as they can for their quarterback, and they want to get it in a wide receiver, and he's the biggest and extremely fast, amazing guy. He's got great lineage. He's awesome. Here's where I differ from everybody else, though. The LA Chargers, all right? Now, hear me out on this one. Who's their coach? Guy by the name of Jim Harbaugh, right? Mm-hmm. So he's got a quarterback who's pretty damn good in Justin Herbert. And I think that if you can give him just a little bit more time, you've got a guy who can probably thread the needle pretty well. And that team, I think, could turn pretty rapidly. So I'm going to say Joe Alt. Now, that's the son of John Alt. And you and I have talked about him before. I'm happy to say he's going to join me on Sunday, Jon, on our Sports Huddle program. And we're going to talk about what's it like to be a guy who's somewhere in the top 5, 6, 7 picks in the draft. What's it like? What have you been doing? How you been doing that? He's got a great tutor in front of him, though. His father at 6'9", 340, and he's 6'9" and 330 pounds. I think he's got the right guy kind of helping him out along the way, Jon. And he was just talking to me the other day. They were both working out together. They were working on all their drills and everything. And it's just phenomenal how much in the family it is and how much this guy looks like John, plays like John. Just a wonderful young man that used to be a quarterback until his dad said, hey, look, there ain't too many quarterbacks 6'9", 300-plus pounds out there, so I think you're going to be an offensive tackle. Anyway, do you have a similar top 5, or did you have Joe maybe not in the top? A lot of people have him going to Tennessee later on, too, like 6 or 7.
Yeah, that's where I have him going, Pete. As far as raw talent and ability to be an impact player, definitely Joe Alt is that guy. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion. But I think a lot of these teams, including even Harbaugh, Pete, even though, as you've said many times, he loves his tight ends, he's got one of the best young quarterbacks that has developed, but he hasn't had the kind of receivers that he needs. And so I don't know if that's Odunze, from Washington, or Malik Neighbors from LSU, or who it is. But I think one of those 2 wide receivers, Pete, one of those 2 top picks at wide receivers, either, LSU, you could take your pick of either of those 2 guys, or Odunze over it's Rome Odunze, I think, over at Washington. That kid is a beast. 92 catches, Pete, 1,600 plus yards for the season, 13 TDs. He looked great against Michigan. And if only things could have broken a little bit more one way, I think Washington could have won that thing because certainly they had the talent. And he is one of the reasons they had that talent. So I'd say either of those two wideouts, Pete, I think are who Harbaugh takes for his quarterback. But if he doesn't, yeah, the quarterback would love having a big stud like Joe Alt right up there in front of him, keeping guys off him on the blind side.
He'll be sitting there for about 8 or 10 years on that left side if they draft him, John. And the only reason I'm going against the grain of everybody else, because you and a lot of other people, I think you're right. You need a receiver. You always need a receiver. My only issue is I think it's so deep this year with receivers. You can go all the way into second, maybe even the third round with receivers. You're still going to get a great one. I mean, this is a really deep draft with great speed, size, all that type of thing. And I think those receivers are a little bit easier to find, and maybe they are next year as well. But there's only a Joe Alter here or so every couple of maybe 5 or 10 years, a guy comes out with that kind of athleticism, I think. So that's why I kind of put him up there. Now, likelihood that it's a receiver, probably about 90%. But I'm going against that, and that's why I'm throwing Joe Alt in there.
Well, that, like you said, that kid, barring injury, because we never know, that kid should play for a decade or more. And his dad's on the Ring of Fame at Kansas City Stadium. So I think this kid's got that same pedigree. Yep. All right. Well, folks, as you know, we don't do Rebel's Edge on Fridays. As I said, top of the show, maybe we'll start doing a Rebel Edge special on Fridays, but right now we don't. We travel on Friday. I am leaving for the West Coast because for Fox, I'm going to be out there covering the Long Beach Grand Prix, Pete. So, you know, just because I don't have enough frequent flyer miles already this year.
Yeah, why not just jump on a plane?
Yeah, why not? So we would remind you, though, if you guys would like to get a little bit deeper involvement with options, you can get our free book called, of course, itsnotanoption.com. And you can get it by going to that website, itsnotanoption.com. And alternatively, folks, you could also go over to marketrebellion.com/get started for education or subscriptions. That's marketrebellion.com. And then you just hit the backslash or the / rather and say, get started. And you could get started trading like Pete and I trade. All right, Pete. Have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow, but I'll be on tomorrow for the 60-second video, not for the Rebel's Edge. Bang.
Bang.